Good evening, everybody. What a beautiful day, huh? It's a wonderful day, beautiful April day, and I'm wearing yellow in honor of the daffodils and the sunflowers and the lemon and maybe the turmeric that we might be talking about, right? So welcome everyone to Tuesday Talks. I'm Seema Kumar. I am the CEO of Cure here. Just a little word about Cure. I see many familiar faces, but for those of you who may not have been here and this is your first visit, I just want to say Cure is an innovation campus, and it really is a place, a gathering place for multiple disciplines, innovators, entrepreneurs, researchers, thinkers to come together for free exchange of ideas across sectors, across disciplines, and really move the needle on advancing healthcare and not settling for anything less than cure, period. And that's why there's a period after our logo, Cure. So welcome to Tuesday Talks. We do this every Tuesday, and we talk about things that are sort of top of mind for people, about your personal health. And what better way to start off April as fresh produce is arriving at our cafeteria to talk about food as medicine. And so we're talking about that today. This is a really, really interesting topic with Dr. Robert Graham, AKA Dr. Rob, the chef. And I'll talk a little bit more about, Dr. Graham's training, or Dr. Rob, right? Dr. Chef. How do you go? Dr. Rob, the chef.
Just don't call me after midnight.
Okay.
Call me anything.
Okay, cool. So we're going to try to get underneath, and we're going to delve into this notion of food as medicine. I think most of us think about food at least as sustenance, or we think about a satisfying meal. So it's about satisfaction, sustenance. But to think about it as medicine, even though we sort of know that it may be instinctively that it's there, that there are really healing properties in food, and to think about to sort of reframe it as medicine. Not medicine just like, medicine because it has medicinal powers, but to even think about it like something you would prescribe as a doctor as part of a holistic, integrated approach to managing health outcomes and dealing with medical problems. And, thinking of nutrition as part of the whole approach. And it's actually, you call it FRESH. That's food, relaxation, exercise, sleep, and happiness. I mean, that sounds wonderful, and I love this FRESH approach. And Dr. Graham, I mean, you are a Harvard-trained researcher and physician. You're board certified in both internal and integrative medicine. You're trained in holistic and functional medicine. You're a public health scientist. You're a health service researcher, TED speaker, food activist, and above and beyond all of that, you are a chef as well. And so you, along with your wife, over the last 20 years, you've launched Fresh Medicine. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And this is just such an extraordinary topic. So let me start by saying, how did you become a public health scientist, food activist, chef, all of the above?
I don't know.
Did you clone yourself and go to different schools at different times?
First of all, thanks, Seema.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone, for this wonderful opportunity to share some of my thoughts on what I think is the forgotten intersection between food and health. After all, it's called health care.
Mm-hmm.
It's not called medicine, right? We practice medicine, but we deliver health care. Mm-hmm. And I think what medicine has done in the last, say, 50 years has mainly focused on the medicine part and has forgotten the true meaning of what I think good medicine is all about, which is health and care. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, how, why? Mm-hmm. I guess when something stares at you over and over again in your face, mm-hmm. and you have the opportunity to change something, either you complain about it, mm-hmm. or you do something about it. Yeah. And for me, and I appreciate the introduction, right? Yeah. How do you know if someone went to Harvard? They tell you within the first 5 minutes of meeting them, right?
Yes.
And so when
That's
I
the first
speak, I
word
don't
that comes out of
have
their
to
mouth.
say
Yeah.
it, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
usually introduced as a Harvard-trained physician.
Yeah.
But it was an awesome time up at Boston. But let me go back a little bit. So my father always says that, why did they always start off introducing you as a Harvard-trained physician? According to my dad and my mom, he prefers, Rob is a son of a farmer and a son of an immigrant born in Jackson Heights, New York, who happened to end up at Harvard Medical School.
Excellent.
And so, if
It
you
goes
know
back to
anything,
your roots,
it
yeah.
always goes back to my roots. So
Yeah.
when you think about what a farmer does in our society, right? By the way, the average age of a farmer in America is, somebody said 80. Not bad, 68 years old,
Wow.
all right? And think, particularly today, think about the role of immigrants in America and their major input into our healthcare, into our culinary spaces, into our culture, right? And so I go back to think about that, right? Because ultimately, what I do is a synthesis of who I am. And very early on in my life, over the bridge in Queens, Jackson Heights, I found something fascinating, that every single person I encountered had their own cultural belief systems around health and healing. And if I go around this room right now, right, I would say that most people don't run to the hospital for their medical issues. They usually ask their mother, their father, their grandfather, right? And that sort of wisdom is completely outside of medicine. There's an old adage in medicine, don't ask, don't tell, right? And so if you use acupuncture or herbs or diets or spirituality or exercise, you don't ask as a doctor.
Yep.
Number one,
Yep.
you don't do what you're taught,
Yep.
right? You're not taught. So we're not taught about
Yep.
prevention, health promotion, so therefore we don't ask about it.
Yep.
And so I realized early on in my career, in my life, that whole world needs to be explored in medicine.
Yep.
And so I go back to I started medical school, I graduated medical school in 2000. So think about where the world of integrative medicine, functional medicine, holistic medicine, lifestyle medicine, whatever you want to call it today,
Yeah.
right, was 20 years ago. So I had the great fortune of starting the first ever elective in integrative medicine at Stony Brook Medical School. It was with a woman named Roger Jaber, and she let me loose. She said to me, go find out what is out there. And so for the young people in this room, back in the day, there was no computer, there was no Google. And so there was this thing called the Yellow Pages. and so here I was, 1997, 98, on Long Island, Stony Brook, and trying to search this world of integrative or complementary medicine. So you start with A. So before you think about a complementary therapy that starts with an A. Perfect, and that's what I did. Acupuncture. Looked to someone near my neighborhood and found this woman named Federique. She not only was an acupuncturist, she was doing acupuncture using bee venom. And I swear to God, it was my first experience into this. I walked into her office, and she was a woman probably in, it's funny, when you were younger, everybody looked older, right? Now everybody looks younger. So she was probably in her 40s, and there was, and I'm telling you guys, I am a skeptic, and that's part of the reason why I did my research. I saw a man roll down her driveway in a wheelchair pushed by his wife. And he had MS. And he barely can get off the table, barely raise his arms, just exhausted. She laid this person down, and she took bees. Now, I'm allergic to bees, too, so think about that day. So she said...
Did you have your EpiPen with you? Just in
I
case?
didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to go see an acupuncturist using bees. And so next thing I know is that she goes back to the backyard in her kind of beehive, gets these bees, puts them in a little kind of pencil container, and next thing you know, she's grabbing these bees by their butt and literally doing acupuncture using bees.
Wow.
Within about an hour, that man walked up that driveway. And every time I tell the story, I get so emotional because that shit doesn't happen. Like, that's not supposed to happen. There's no biomedical research that will ever describe it. I saw it with my own eyes. And it wasn't one time. It was multiple times
Yeah.
I saw this. And so I said to myself, that has to be told.
Yeah.
And then I went through from A to Z, to yoga maybe, for acupuncture to yoga, and that's part of my practice.
And you went to Ayurveda next?
Yes, so I went to Ayurveda next, exactly.
yeah.
And now I teach at a Ayurveda culinary school
Excellent.
here in New York. So why, how? I don't know. I just ended up following this question of why isn't it integrated into conventional medicine? How is it integrated into conventional? Why isn't it? And what was the limitations? And that kind of led me up to Boston to study complementary and integrated medicine at Harvard Medical School. And I'm proud to say that I was one of the very first fellows to be accepted to the program to have a fellowship, just like a specialist does, in integrative medicine while I obtained my master's in public health there, focusing on nutrition.
That's great. I mean, like, so here I can understand, going back to your roots and looking at, alternative medicine and trying to figure out, okay, how to integrate that. Because when we go to see doctors today, it's about sick care, right? You describe what's wrong with you, and then you get medicine to take care of it, right? You don't talk about all of the other things. So completely understand. But then where did food come into the picture, and why did you end from the, from the lab, you went into the kitchen? Where did that happen?
I say that I am a new messenger of a very old story. So going back to Ayurveda,
Yeah.
5,000 years ago, when diet is wrong, medicine is of little to no need. When diet is right,
Yep.
medicine is of little to no need. 5,000 years ago. Fast forward to 2,500 years ago. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food, medicine be thy food. 2000, Graham. Next one. Right? So that kind of idea, right, is that we have to remember, and if you, one of those early experiences, when you go to your traditional healer, okay, that does a traditional medical therapy, like acupuncture, Ayurveda, and so many more,
Yeah.
homeopathy. The first question they ask you is, what do you eat? What are you eating? That's the last question we ask.
Yeah.
And I would, think about the last time your doctor, let's go a step further, your cardiologist, your endocrinologist, gastroenterologist, which are all specialties in medicine that deal with these very preventable, reversible chronic disease that's impacting our healthcare today.
Yep. And even those forms you fill out, right? The intake form when you go, it asks you about smoking, alcohol. It asks you about, have you ever had this or that or that or that or that. I rarely have seen anything about food.
Yeah, if you go to my website, we have our intake form on our website. And part of it is because I want people, we can talk about this too, pre-education, is that think about how you choose your doctor too. Someone about a month ago said to me, I dated a guy named Graham in college. Your last name is Graham, and you're in my neighborhood, so I thought I'd see you. I don't know, I do a lot more.
Very scientific.
Yeah, right? And this is your doctor,
Yes.
right? And so I think, going back to the idea of fresh,
Yes.
right? So I through my education and through just my experiences, right? And as well as my wife. And if you ever met my wife, I call the secret sauce behind it all, because she is truly the healer. She's trained in aromatherapy. She's a health coach through the lens of positive psychology, which is, I think that is the secret sauce, positive psychology, and we can talk about that. She's trained in nutrition. She's trained as a yoga therapist. Probably a bunch of other things that I can't remember offhand. But so we used her art and my science and build this fresh, right? And every single patient that goes through our encounter, before the dreaded, and just going back to the intake form,
Yeah.
the first line, any doctors in the building here? Sorry, Dr. Aponte. All right. So the first thing is this thing called CC. What does it stand for, Adam? Think about that. Chief complaint.
Headache or
No, just think about the word
whatever.
complaint.
Yeah.
What's your problem? Right? What are you here for? What's your problem? So that whole kind of discussion right off the bat is a complaint driven. You know, I chose to be a doctor to serve,
Yes.
not to take care of complaints.
Yeah.
Right? So I would argue, say, it should be your chief concern. Right? What's concerning you? I think it's just the tone is different there too. And then you go in, right? And then your assessment and plan, right, is based upon your problem list. Again, the context.
Context.
So I changed the whole thing,
yeah.
right? Fresh is all about a fresh start, a fresh
Yeah.
approach.
Yep.
And I just got to say one thing, because I see Sherry here. So Sherry is, she works with the Meatless Mondays campaigns, the Monday campaigns. I guess there's a conflict with they're not. I am an ambassador of the Meatless Monday campaign. But one of the great Sid Lerner, who was the founder of it, said to me that you have to build a company that is ironic, right? And so when you think about medicine, you think usually old, stale,
Yep.
not the way, right? And so you would throw
Bureaucratic.
fresh in it, it's like fresh
Yes.
medicine. And that's how we became fresh medicine. And then again, those 5 ingredients or those 5 pillars
Yes.
of well-being is assessed in every encounter.
And we'll come back to all of the rest of the alphabets on the acronym of FRESH. But back to food, right? So
It starts with food, I'm sorry.
it
So
starts
it
with
starts
food.
with
Yeah,
food.
it starts with food. So we all kind of, instinctively know, there's good food and bad food, okay? Don't go eat a burger with French fries and a shake every day. Eat more fresh fruits and vegetables and all of the above. But what you're saying, it goes well beyond that. And it's not about the FDA food pyramid where you eat X amount of carbs, X amount of oil, X amount of proteins, etc. It's much, much more than that. There is an actual prescription level specificity to it.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
True. So thank God that the pyramids have gone bye-bye, right? So I think the plate is what we focus on now, right? So according to the USDA, it's your plate, right? Half of it should be fruits and vegetables, and that's where we should start off. Right? I would push it. I would put 75% should be fruits and vegetables. And going back to the original question, it all starts with food because again, 80% of these chronic diseases are again preventable and reversible with a dietary approach. Every single disease we have out there, just go through some of them. Hypertension, DASH diet. IBS-D, irritable bowel syndrome with diarrhea, low FODMAP diet, right? Autoimmune diet, anti-inflammatory diet. These are all diets that have been studied. Let me say that again. Everything I do is evidence-based and has been studied for the prevention and or use within the medical paradigm, but we don't prescribe it. High cholesterol, the first line, again, if you go to the American Society of Cardiology, if you go to the American College of Endocrinology, for every disease, there's a 6-week first pillar that says therapeutic lifestyle changes. You're supposed to do a therapeutic lifestyle change for 6 weeks before you initiate drug therapy.
Wow.
Standard of care,
Yeah.
which hasn't been done. So that is really important, and that's part of the reason why I did become a chef, right? Because I knew that the trajectory 20 years later was to the point, I think we're going to get to it in a little bit, about the use of what I think food as medicine, not is medicine. So food is medicine as what I call it the movement that's been around for 2,000 years, but food as medicine will be the intervention that will change healthcare. Because we're going to prescribe it to patients with chronic diseases via a new term called medically tailored meals. And these are diseases that are preventable and reversible by the use of diet.
So we talked a little bit about, I have a couple more questions and then we'll go delve into, yeah.
Bad food?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as good food and bad
Yeah.
food, except, okay, ultra-processed foods. Okay, that is bad food. Gluten's bad today, good tomorrow. Eggs bad today, good tomorrow. So there's a lot of that kind of talk. And that's part of the reason why I think people are confused,
Yes.
right?
It's like you roll your eyes when the next new study comes out.
Exactly.
You know?
Butter's back,
Yeah.
butter's bad,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Red wine is good for you, red wine is bad for you.
yeah, today, did you see today's headline? Moderate alcohol consumption is bad for you. Moderate, breaking news.
Yeah.
Trump's guilty. Trump's been indicted, by the way, okay? 34 felony counts.
Yeah.
But the other thing that came out today or last night was that moderate alcohol use is detrimental to your health, where we've been taught for the past 50, 60 years that women 1 drink a day, men 2 drinks a day confers benefit for health outcomes.
Yeah.
Today's breaking news, systematic review said that even moderate alcohol drinking is bad for your health.
But your point is that, there is no sort of, good food and bad food except for a few exceptions, right? And there are a few exceptions. So, it's not the flavor of the month, to use a pun, but it's much more about a consistent, healthy meal, but then using medically prescribed diets as part of your holistic integrated plan, right? For wellness.
Correct.
Not
Now,
to drink.
bad foods too. So, like for me,
Yeah.
strawberries could potentially kill me. So it's a bad food for me, right? And that's the other thing, right? This is where the idea of another world that I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by, epigenetics, nutrigenomics, but more than that, right?
Next week, we're going to talk about food allergies, by the way.
Oh,
I've just learned
I
a lot.
I have something to say about that too.
Okay.
Um,
Right.
So I think when you're talking about bad food for you, right? And that's through discovery,
Yes.
right? Because for me, I've had 3 episodes when I've ate strawberries that each one has gotten worse, right? And I want to be around, so I'm not going to attempt any sort of strawberry. And as a chef, drives me crazy
Yes.
because everyone puts a strawberry on a dessert. And then
Yes.
strawberries is number one,
One
it's
of the
one of the
things-
dirtiest foods out there
Okay.
from a pesticide point of view. EWG, right? EWG, clean 15, dirty dozen. And so for me, a bad food is strawberry.
Yep. So 1 or 2 more questions around that. So we talked about meatless Mondays. Is it okay to have an impossible meatless Monday?
You mean impossible meat?
Impossible meatless Monday?
Yeah, so I think,
What do
we
you
talk
think about that? Like
yes,
synthetic foods,
Yeah, I know,
yeah.
so it's good. So this whole idea of, I think, despite my best work and others that have tried to have this very intelligent conversation between food and health, one of the things that has happened is this explosion of meatless foods or synthetic foods.
Yep.
So the way I talk about this is the same way you mentioned even eating a hamburger and fries every day is bad for your health. I would say eating an Impossible Burger every single day is bad for your health. If you eat an occasional well-fed cow in the form of a burger, it's probably not that bad for you.
Okay.
The same way I think about Impossible Beyond burgers, right? Every once in a while, if you have one, it's not going to make that big of a difference. But I disagree with the fact that this is going to replace whole food plant-based burgers.
Okay. So now, speaking of whole foods and plant-based, do you recommend, like I come from a culture where many of us are vegetarians for the most part. Meat is something, if we have to eat, we eat. And also a culture, and I'm going to ask you about the cultural things about it as well. So before you go to the doctor, if you have the sniffles, you first have ginger or ginger tea or something like that, right? So how do you think that this whole notion of meat is bad and just stick with plant-based diet? Is that better for you?
No, I think, well, 2 things. Eating more plants is good for you and good for the planet, right? So you can't talk about the health of the being without talking our impact on the planet, right? So we eat way too much meat. So from a cultural point of view, right, as I said, I was born and raised in Jackson Heights, of Latin American heritage. Poor. Meat was something that was celebratory, right? But we have found that now meat has kind of taken over that half a plate, right? And I think, also, we often talk about healthy eating being expensive. But I also think we should have the conversation of why bad meat is so cheap, right? Why, like how we always focus on that part, right? It's like, if you eat healthy, it's so expensive to eat healthy. I would argue if you eat bad, why is it so cheap to eat bad?
Yeah.
Right? And so we
Yeah,
have to have these sort
yeah.
of conversations
Yeah.
within ourselves.
Yes.
And I think in this good food movement, right, Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food, the best advice you can have, right? Eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. What about meat? Go back to that first part, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's our prescription when it comes to food, right? Eat more plants. I don't talk so much. One thing I also, as someone who was raised not with a lot,
Yep.
I have problems with the culture we have right now as defined as I am a paleo, I am keto, I am vegan, right? And I have seen, and I've done some work with some meal companies, we self-describe ourselves. So if you ever, anyone ever ordered a meal kit, a meal plan, they ask you, right, what do you consider yourself, right? And when I was consulting with this company, 85% of that company's customers identified them as plant-based. 92% of the orders were not plant-based. So aspirationally, we are, okay? And I think that's an important thing to consider, right? Is because the other thing is that we have a lot of people that haven't explored the connection between food and health personally,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
When I eat this, I have acid reflux. So instead of taking that purple pill, maybe just pull back on that thing that's making you burp
Yeah.
or gassy, you know? And I think that's, you know, and I have to say it, men are horrible at it, women are better at it. And for men, it usually doesn't have, it's not an issue until it hurts, right? And that's oftentimes too late. And so just as a plug for guys to take better control and better attention for their health.
So, but you know, your fresh medicine is more than just, it starts with food. But then you have R is for relaxation, right? E is for exercise, S is for sleep, and H is for happiness.
Correct. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And so, you know, it's a great acronym. It's easy mnemonic to remember. So how are all those other things integrated with food?
So oftentimes people say, what's the most important pillar, right? And I would say that they're all equally important, and the power is in their synergy, right? Because just think about that, right? When you sleep well, everything else kind of falls into place, right? When you eat well, you sleep well, right? And then when you're happy, you all do all the other things, right? Our motto is, when it comes to health, it starts with food, but at the end, what we truly want in life is to be happy. And I think that happiness component of it all, right, is that we all want to be happy, right? It's in our Declaration of Independence, but we were never taught how to do it, right? So we're never taught how to do it. And that's where the area and the field of positive psychology I'm fascinated by, right? Because again, it's maintaining your well-being north of neutral, right? And so many people just live their lives being, I'm good, I'm okay, right? But I think life could be a lot more than that. I think that's where the base should be. Yep. So we should all focus being north of neutral. And if you think about this, right? Today I took the train here, right? And like I kind of like the fact that now you can count down, you know, like 2 minutes for the broken down, 6 train.
Yeah.
And so there I was, 3 minutes out, and I saw it from down a block, and I was like, should I run? Should I not run? And I said, you know what? Just let me stroll, right? And that whole concept of just slowing down is the relaxation part of it all, right? Because oftentimes we feel that we have to get this accomplished, but oftentimes we feel better when we're more relaxed.
Yes.
And to the point of the train, right? You ever have that train, you miss the train, and then you cross the street and it's a red light, and then you cross again and you miss the train again? So that's a concept of the opposite of what they call broaden and building.
Yeah.
And so when good things happen, other things happen that are good for you.
Yep.
So.
So I just got a text message on my watch that people on LinkedIn are asking about fish, because we focused on meat and vegetables. We did not talk about fish. So can we talk a little bit about fish? What do you think about fish and, health benefits of it? How much? How little?
Yeah, quality of fish too. Again, going back, planet and person, right? And so I don't know if you guys all are, our oceans are filthy, full of plastic. Don't think that what we put in our mouth doesn't show up. In culinary school, right, we break down fish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And fish contains a lot of little worms in them, right? So number one cause of parasitosis in humans is usually fish. And the fresher it is, the rawer it is, the more of the parasites are going to be in there.
I hope nobody's eating fish tonight. No, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
yeah. And so again, from a health benefit point of view,
Yes.
right? Again, going back to the science of it,
Yeah.
people that do consume fish, live longer than those who don't. In that pivotal study amongst fish eaters, pescatarians, and vegetarians, pescatarians live longer. And again, it's through moderation, right? And so going back to the same sort of fish, eat some, not too much. And if you care about the planet and our oceans, there are things that you can make decisions that are more sustainable.
That's great. Later on this month, we're going to be talking about longevity. And do you think food is, to some degree, a fountain of youth?
So the research on longevity, and I've been fortunate enough to work with them. It comes out of Dan Buettner's work with the Blue Zones. And I've sat on different panels with them. And they have 9. They have power of 9. They have 9 things that
You must eat, like
Yeah,
beans and
yeah.
this
So
and that,
being yeah. So he has 9 things
Yes.
that he has proven to increase your life. And he's around the world. They're called the Blue Zones. Why is it blue? Because he had a blue pen when he was doing his research, and he circled the areas of the world where there were blue. And if he had a green
that
pen, it would be
people
green.
live
pen.
more centenarians than
Yes,
whatever
exactly.
and things
So in
like
Japan,
that. Right?
women live the longest.
Yeah.
In Italy, men live the longest.
Yeah.
So there's the core power of 9.
Yeah.
We synthesize those 9 into 5.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think the research behind longevity is based upon, again, your genes and you. And when I was in medical school, the thought was that our genes influence everything. And I would say over the past 25 years, we realized that our genes only influence about 30 to 40% of expression.
Yep.
So therefore, 60 to 70% is modifiable. And I think that's where we have to start talking about it, because oftentimes we think about AI and technology, which I love, but again, we focus on the downstream, and I'm trying to go upstream, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, I think technology has a very important role in it, and your telomeres are very important. Those are the little snippets at the end of your genes that determine how long you're gonna live. And there's very simple ways to, as again, the FRESH model, right?
Yeah.
And the power of 9, that increase those lengths of those telomeres.
So we talked a little bit about food. We talked about, happiness to some degree, maybe, but that's comes from a little bit of positive psychology, right? And don't worry, be happy, maybe, in a small,
Yeah.
And then we talked about, we haven't talked about exercise yet. Talk a little bit about exercise and why that's important.
Yeah, so
Can you just eat well, just sit on the couch, don't do anything, be happy, and live a long, healthy, happy life?
probably,
Okay.
probably, but you have to probably walk to get your groceries.
Okay.
And so that's what I think, again, the United States Preventive Task Force recommends
Yeah.
150 minutes of exercise per week, okay? We break it down to move 30 minutes a day. I break it down more than that. I move 15 minutes in one direction, turn around and move 15 minutes back again, right? And so if you think about that, 30 minutes a day times 7 is 210 minutes a day. And if you go back to the studies of the Blue Zones and longevity, these are not people on what I call the Swear Masters and the treadmills. These are people that move naturally through their living environment, right? And so taking the train,
Yeah. Walking to Penn
walking further.
Station.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's where we have to first start, because we started getting way down, again, downstream, and I'm about going upstream.
Peloton and,
Yeah, it's move,
yeah, just.
right? Just
yeah.
move. And that's the kind of concept that I think we try to embark on our patients.
Yeah.
Because once you start moving, you will keep moving.
Yeah.
But many people are just
Just sedentary.
Sitting,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we are going to take audience questions. I just want to make sure we address two quick things. One is the microbiome and the role of the gut and the gut-brain, connection, and all of that has a role to play. So that's part one of the question. The part two of the question is, okay, I can measure my move. I could possibly put in, what food I had maybe, but how do I get this thing to tell me how happy I am? The sleep, it tells me. And it tells me how relaxed I am based on, my heart rate, right? Right? Exactly,
HRV.
yes.
If you're
Yes.
fancy, you have the HRV there. Do you have HRV there?
Yes, I do.
Oh, yeah.
I do, and I have a, AFib measurement as well, yes.
So I think with happiness, right, let's start with that one first, right? So I think that's an internal dialogue, right? So ask yourself, at any particular moment, this goes back to mindfulness training. And again, during my time at Harvard, I had the privilege, right, of kind of formalizing the science of what they call the NIH and NCAM strategic plan. So NCAM, NIH, really is the government funding of complementary and integrative medicine research. And I'd done training with John Kabat-Zinn, done training with Herbert Benson. And one of the things that came out very early in this teachings was, ask yourself, are you happy? Okay? If you're happy, keep going. If you're not, change something. And so I don't think you need a watch,
Yeah.
right, to ask yourself that question.
There's a watch inside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes the best watch is what you're watching, right? And so if you're not happy, change it. If you are happy,
Yes.
continue going. And your first question?
The, gut
gut
brain,
microbiome.
yeah.
So that's an area of both personal interest, but also how I drive a lot of my care. So when I was doing my early training, again, in early 2000s, I was rotating within a clinic that almost every single person got their microbiome tested. So I've been doing the same microbiome testing for 17 years. Had the privilege of calling Marty Blaser at NYU a mentor. And if you know anything about Marty Blaser, he started at NYU. He almost won, I think he might have been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize because he discovered H. pylori. And then 20, 30 years later, he did a big mea culpa saying, oh my God, I just destroyed your microbiome because I was treating this H. pylori bacteria with 3 rounds of antibiotics. And then he focused his second career on the role of the microbiome, right? And so I've always been fascinated by that. And I always believe that you are what you eat, but you really are what the bacteria in your bacteria, your viruses, and your fungi eat,
Yes.
right? And we have quickly, and if anyone doesn't know the role of the microbiome, it governs a lot of things. Our metabolism, 70% of our immune system is within our gut, which goes back to the food allergy issue,
Yes.
right, if we want to bring that up. And then 95% of hormones, particularly serotonin and dopamine, are made in your gut. Fix your gut, you will start the process of fixing yourself. And so the only bad part or dirty part about it is that you either have to go in and get a sample or you have to give me a sample. And so I always say poop in a box. I also think that's fascinating is, like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, looking at people's microbiome, right, and changing their diet first. The fascinating part is that, again, in medicine, we learned that the gut is composed of many different parts. But one thing that has been forgotten is the role of the small intestine, right? The small intestine's only job in our body is to absorb the nutrients we consume, right? And we have completely jacked up our small intestine. And for doctors out there, if you start seeing patients that are chronically supplemented, you check vitamin B12, iron, magnesium, selenium, vitamin D, which now we're told that we shouldn't be testing people because the United States Task Force says we shouldn't. If they're chronically low, despite not being vegan, something's going up with the absorption because we've forgotten one thing. Ingestion, digestion, and absorption are 3 important parts, and we've forgotten about that. The absorption part, right? And so in my practice, I test a lot of gut testing, both small intestine and large intestine. And I do food allergy testing, just to circle it all back around, after we modulate and fix the gut. Because if our allergies are driven by our immune system, fix the immune system and our allergens will be better.
Yeah. And I learned something today. as we were preparing
you.
for, yes, lots of things today. Lots and lots of things today, including the fact that, food allergies actually are skyrocketing so much more. And, but at the same time, so it's almost like a food as medicine and, food that can actually, be harmful to you. And that is based not on the food itself, but on your immune system and your gut. So I think we have lots of questions from the audience, and there's a few questions that have come in from LinkedIn Live. So let me open it up because I've been hogging the questions so far. Okay, Adam.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rob, for your enlightenment. I've been getting these lectures, by the way, a long time from this gentleman. But I want to hone in on something that you and I have been talking about for a long time, and really I want the audience to understand the whole concept of medically tailored meals and the possibility of taking a diabetic off insulin, taking a hypertensive off antihypertensive medications, and how much of a role can food really play in doing that?
Yeah, it's really my passion. So I focus on my day really on what I call the 4 Ps. People, patients, plates, and politics. And so medically tailored meals is a relatively new definition, again, of an old intervention. So for anyone from New York, there's been a great organization called God's Love We Deliver, right? Karen Pearl just stepped down from CEO. But so what they've done for the past, say, 50 years, I think, is offer people food with chronic diseases. Particularly, it started during the HIV and AIDS epidemic, right? And they started noticing that if you give people a healthy meal, and again, nothing against non-medically tailored meals, right? Because I think hunger, we can talk about that another day, right? Hunger and food insecurity is a big, big problem in our society, right?
Yep, a lot of people here focused on that as well, yeah.
I was fortunate to attend the White House conference last fall on this discussion. And one of the things that came out of it, I'm going to get to your question because it's all tied in together, is that the goal by 2030 is to reduce the burden of chronic diseases, but more importantly, I think what was the big takeaway was to end hunger by 2030, right? So we can totally end hunger in America by 2030 if we just choose to.
Yeah.
Reversing chronic disease is another big issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that takes into teaching people how to eat, how to cook, and what to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So to Adam's point is this. If you break a leg, you're going to get a crutch, right? Then after the crutch, you're going to go get physical therapy. And then you're going to watch videos on how to incorporate you back into your normal life. It's the same thing I think about medically tailored meals. Medically tailored meals are meals designed by registered dietitians, created by chefs, and prescribed by doctors. And currently, many Medicare Advantage programs cover medically tailored benefits, medically tailored meals as a covered benefit. 270 meals per year, okay? 270 meals. Most Advantage Medicare programs do that. What we're trying to do right now, led by Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, is to have it covered under Medicare and Medicaid. And there's a bill up in Congress right now by the Ways and Means Committee, and I spend a lot of my time down there speaking on behalf of the importance of a food-first approach to medically tailored meals. So the point is this. You have a diabetic, okay, who's been a diabetic for, say, 15 years, right? They're probably on insulin at this point. And if you know anything about insulin, insulin is very expensive. And the biggest side effect of insulin is that it makes you gain weight. So it's a vicious cycle. You gain more weight, you need more insulin. You need more insulin, you gain more weight. And the science has shown, right, the DPP, the Diabetes Prevention Trial, way back in the day, showed that diet and lifestyle is more effective than metformin and exercise together, okay? So now, what if that person with a broken leg gets a crutch, a medically tailored meal? Eat this, okay? As much as I love to cook, it takes time, skill, and money, right? And nobody wants to clean, right? And so if I
washing
give you a
dishes.
certain meal plan for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, science has shown that during that intervention, you can reduce healthcare costs, increase patient outcomes, and reduce the cost of readmissions. There have been a lot of studies on chronic diseases, but more of the studies have looked into 2-week readmissions in congestive heart failure. And so that quick intervention, someone's discharged with congestive heart failure, the number one cause of them becoming readmitted is, maybe not the number one cause. Number one cause is not seeing their doctor in time. Number two cause is dietary indiscretions. So you go get Chinese food, right? And this is the reason why I bring this up is that this is a patient of mine when I was in medical school. This guy, he would be discharged with fulfillment heart failure with an EF of 30%, which means his heart is only pumping about 30%. He would go and get discharged and have a celebratory dinner at a Chinese restaurant. And guess what? On Tuesday, he was back in the hospital. And no one asked him why. And no one asked him why he was eating Chinese food. And because, this is what getting to the question. Why? Because when he was sick, his mother used to give him Chinese food. And so he thought that as a reward for him to getting out of the hospital, he would treat himself to Chinese food. And so that simple conversation with him changed his whole trajectory. And so I'm not saying that I was only responsible for that by asking that question, but what ended up happening is that he stopped celebrating with eating Chinese food.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And again,
it's
nothing against
just
Chinese food because
nothing, no.
Spanish food, Italian food is all
Yeah.
salty. And
Yeah.
as a chef,
I mean, once in a while, you can treat yourself too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not not as a celebration. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and as a chef, we always say,
Yeah.
the reason why we're chefs, our job is to bring you back into our restaurant. And the only way we're going to do that is by adding salt, fat, and sugar into your diet. Okay?
I think lots of questions. Okay.
Hi there. Oh,
And we'll also, those on LinkedIn, just a quick note that we will take your questions as well, and we'll come back to that. Go ahead.
hi there. So this was a very riveting conversation, and appreciate your insight. So actually, my mom had a tumor removed last week from close to her pancreas. It's cancer-free, but she was in the cancer center. So great news.
Great
But when she was finally put back on solid foods and transitioning into foods aside from ice, chips, and water, they brought out a tray, and it was Jell-O.
Always Jell-O.
Always the Jell-O.
Green?
It was yellow, actually, yellow Jell-O. They brought a little cup of the apple juice, the one with a little aluminum
Perfect.
top,
Great.
and then bone broth, a sorbet, very sugary sorbet. And then on the tray was a cup with 5 packets of sugar in it. And I took a photo of it because I
Oh,
sent
send
it
it
to
to
my
me.
I sent it to my sister. I'll send it to you. And I'm like, she just got a tumor removed right next to her pancreas. How is the hospital system providing this type of food? And what are the conversations as you as a professional that are seeing within the hospital system to transition this food in congruency, I guess, with patients?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that I've done a lot of work in that. So Wendell Berry, Google Wendell Berry, he's a great quote. We are fed by a food industry who pays no attention to health, and we're fed by a health industry which pays no attention to food. That is my mission to change, right? And so for about 10 years, I was up the road at Lenox Hill Hospital. And if you know anything about Lenox Hill Hospital today, right, it went from a 7% patient satisfaction around their meals to now 93% satisfaction around their meals. Simple. You actually change the way you, number one, buy your food, deliver your food, and prepare your food. And going back to the culinary aspect of it. You go to a Hilton or Marriott, right? It's 2 in the morning, you want a hamburger, within about a half hour, you have a hamburger and fries up in your room, right? That's called a la carte, right? And so in the hospital, right, what you have to do is limit the options, right? Procure, right? Better ingredients, and activate the kitchen to cook. Most of the people in the kitchens want to cook, but all they do is just put things together. And again, the problem again is it's what's the issue. So I always say food is a problem, but it's also the solution. So you have to think about food as an intervention, not as a cost. Because in most places, even in our schools, and I work with Mayor Adams too on certain initiatives, it's seen as a cost, right? And so therefore, the CFO wants to just to reduce the cost of care, not thinking about the long-term effects of it all. And so what Lenox Hill did, right, and I would say that I was heavily involved in this strategic plan before I left. We started a rooftop garden at Lenox Hill Hospital. And it was the first ever rooftop garden at a hospital in New York City, serving patients rooftop to bedside stuff. And again, we fought against, I'm gonna say fought, we fought against these large contract food vendors that their whole goal is to reduce the cost of food 10 years out. So it's a high cost in the beginning, but 10 years out, the hospital pays less for that same amount of food. And so you have to change the whole system. It even goes back to the diet. I just had a patient today, right? Because everybody wants to be on Ozempic now.
We have a question
Yeah.
from LinkedIn about
Yeah.
Ozempic.
And I am now refusing to have this conversation. Number one, I can't get it covered anymore, period. You have to go to an endocrinologist, and you have to go to a very select endocrinologist to get this covered, right? Partly because what people are not understanding is that the fundamentals of things that we're trying to talk about today, right?
Yep.
We can call them fresh, or whatever we want to call the foundations of health, are not going to go away by taking this pill or this shot, right? And I think once people are starting to realize things like we've done at Lenox Hill Hospital, okay, and other hospitals, Boston Medical has a beautiful rooftop garden. There's a lot of this movement that, again, going back to your first question, how did I end up doing? I just saw something that I had to do something about, right? And that's my father's influence. My father was a farmer. When it rained 3 days in a row on a farm, you got to figure out how to do something about this. And if it was dry for a week in a row, you figure it out, right? And so I think we all have a role to see what we see and to change something, right? And it's a kind of a corny old adage, be the change what you see in the world. But I dare people to think about that way, because I think if you do start shaking up some things, it's good to be a little bit of a disruptor until you find yourself
Yes.
outside the box.
Yes.
And then you build a new box.
And then you build a new box.
Yeah.
Yes. I think we saw lots of questions there. I think.
I apologize for my back to this beautiful people.
So I think, okay, we'll take one from here and then you.
Thank you. You mentioned cholesterol. So the traditional understanding that doctors studied in school is that high cholesterol comes from eggs and meat products, etc. The latest theory is that it comes from eating a lot of fruits and like a lot of it's what was the name of the thing? The fruit juice, the fructose. Okay,
Yeah.
Right. So, what is your opinion? For example, I have a very high cholesterol. I hardly eat meat, so it's very likely it's coming from eating a lot of fruits. Do you have any observation?
Yeah, so
Thank you.
people have heard me speak before. So first I like to drop the science, and then I'll give you my opinion, okay? So the idea, and if all of you guys are old enough to remember, back in the day, total cholesterol, what we focused on. I'm going to look at Adam because we went to kind of medical school at the same time. So total cholesterol of 200, okay? That was the bad thing. And then this idea of good and bad started coming about.
Yeah.
HDL, LDLs, right?
Yeah.
And so we started targeting our goal, not total, now the percentage, the ratio of HDL to LDL, right? So if you step back and think about that, right? So a lot of the science, early science, showed that patients who had higher cholesterol levels also had higher risks of heart disease, okay? And heart disease is just not, it's cardiovascular disease. It's also heart and stroke. Think about it that way, okay? But then you start thinking about this, right? So I actually ended up doing, and this is part of the reason why I went to Boston to study research, right? Because I wanted to understand why, right? So now you start looking at patients who've had heart attacks. They present to the hospital with what they call an acute MI, in an active heart attack. You draw their bloods and you see their cholesterol. The majority of people that have active heart disease or an evolving MI or heart attack have cholesterol less than 120. LDL is less than 120. So how does that connect, right? And so if you lower the threshold for LDL in terms of normalcy, and right now I was seeing patients this morning, the normal LDL on LabCorp right now is less than 100,
Oh, wow.
right?
Yeah, that's low.
So that's low, right? But then you start thinking about every single cell in our body needs cholesterol, right? And so the question is, what is that ratio? Now, cholesterol is a proxy of heart disease. And most doctors, even cardiologists, don't check what they call a Reynolds score. Instead of checking a Reynolds score, which is an algorithmic score to determine your likelihood of developing heart disease in the next 10 years, isn't that what we're trying to avoid, right? Is a calculable percentage, right? And so, to your question, so that's the science behind it, right? And so the idea also of using statins behind it, a lot of the research comes from secondary prevention, someone who's had a heart attack, not primary prevention, except the study, Jupiter study, right, that showed that Crestor, 5 milligrams of Crestor confirmed a slight benefit for primary prevention. That's what we're all trying to do, prevent that first heart attack, right? And so in terms of cholesterol, right, and I wear avocados, partly because they're not eggs, by the way, they're avocados. I know. They're older. So, yeah, so now they look like old eggs, fresh avocados. And so the concept of what I learned, okay, is that plants don't contain cholesterol. So you eat more plants, you have less cholesterol. In terms of eggs, right, I think that science has been proven wrong, okay? But I also have to think about when it comes to animal proteins, right? And this is somewhat bougie, okay? But I also don't trust, and this comes from my mom, who was not bougie. She's an 84-year-old woman, right, who just doesn't trust our healthcare system and our food systems. And she has taught me very early age, and this is part of the reason why I always bring up my father and my mother, because my mom always, as a Latina, is very distrustful. Skeptical. I don't trust you. And to this day, she doesn't trust me all that much, okay? Because she knows best, right? And I think, to your point, I have never in my whole career seen a diabetic become a diabetic because they ate too much fruit, okay? Yes, we often consume too much fruit juices in terms of fructose, but not enough fruits and vegetables. And again, in terms of cholesterol, about 60 to 7% of cholesterol is made by your genes. So we only have a modifiable there, in that case, about 30 to 40%. And so oftentimes in America we have, not just in America, but globally, we are fiber deficient. And what happens with fiber, you eat more fiber, it grabs your cholesterol particles and you poop them out. And how do you know you're pooping out cholesterol? It floats. Fat and oil, fat and water. If your poop floats,
So then
too much
before you
fat
flush,
in your
just
diet.
check, yeah.
Yeah. If you wipe too much fat. Okay? So again, the body is always talking to us. We just don't listen and don't see.
Okay, all right, next time.
Maybe. It's really, it's so hard.
It's all multifactorial.
It's so hard, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Buy good eggs, though. Right? Buy good eggs.
I think we had a question here.
Pasture-raised
Yes.
eggs. What are good eggs? Pasture-raised eggs. If the yolk looks like Seamus, it's not good egg. If it looks like this woman's here, and I forget her name, that's a good egg. Right? Because they're if egg, should we go there?
Yeah, go
All
for
right.
it.
So if you think about an egg, all right, the yolk, okay, the yolk is dependent on what that chicken is eating, right? So a yolk, again, a orange yolk, right? That chicken's been grazing. He or she's been eating, right? If it's this, it's probably grain fed. Same thing about, this whole conversation about grass-fed versus normal, grain-fed beef, okay? We prefer grain-fed beef. Why? Because they're usually fed grain in a feedlot, and they're fatter. And we love the taste of fat on our mouths. Although grass-fed is
Natural.
more natural and regenerative, and, but it's, again, the cows are moving.
Yeah.
So there's less fat.
By the way, this is the inside color of avocado too.
It's true.
It's true.
And avocados don't contain cholesterol.
Yes,
It contains fat,
yes.
good fat.
Good fat.
And that's a skinny on fat.
So we have a question here first, and then one over there.
So first of all, I'm enjoying it so much, and I lost the bet to Connie because I thought it was eggs on your socks.
I know. Actually, yeah, I know.
So I want to say to the lady that you should get a DNA test. In my family, we have a branch that have elevated cholesterol regardless of what they eat. So it can be genetic as well. The other thing I want to say is that my husband was about to get on a whole list of drugs and came home, and it was actually his initiative to change our diet. And at that point of time, more than 50% of it was meat, because when I asked him, what do you want for dinner, he said steak. So there you go. No more, and no more drugs, and he lost 30 pounds, totally vegan for 3 months.
Wow.
And it was pretty transformative. I always ate well. I may have reduced meat over the years. My question, I have 2 questions. I do a lot of cancer research, and one is that I'm very concerned about the role of antibiotics in terms of our microbiome and the effect on children and allergies, irritable bowel syndrome, etc. So that's one question, what you think about that. I think we need better antibiotics. The other thing is that, I don't know if you do anything in cancer, but MD Anderson are literally feeding their patients 50 grams of fiber. So that's not, not greens, just fiber, because it correlates with better response to immunotherapy, which is potentially a cure.
Yeah, so I just want to put it out there too, that I'm still the drug dealer. All right, I still dole out drugs, because many people think I'm only doing food. I still have I was going to write a prescription pad, but it was like I still have an EMR with ERX, okay? So drugs have a
you're not
role.
replacing, yeah.
100%, right? UTIs, as much as I love uva ursi and cranberry, you may need you likely need an antibiotic, okay? So there is a role for it. But there is a overdosed, and there was a great book written years ago called Overdose America. And we just give out too much of it. And part of it is, again, we do what we're taught, right? And again, going back to medical education, right? And even just thinking about us, right? And so I was going to look at you, but you don't, and I was looking at myself, but. Yeah, what I was going to say is that, so you tie your shoe a certain way, right? Because you're taught that way, right? And so when in medicine, and again, it's not necessarily doctors, right? And going back to your first point, is that we have a time, and it's I'm going to say it, I don't know why, right? I don't know why we've allowed ourselves to be timed for visits at this point, right? Ultimately, it's about patient care. And it's part of the reason why I left and I started my own practice. I was told by someone I had to do it faster, not better. That's a true story. And to the point of antibiotics, sometimes they have a big role in it, but oftentimes there isn't. And the literature is profound in terms of the role of antibiotics and its effect on the microbiome. It kills everything. Now, equally important, what you mentioned, that 80% of antibiotics are not fed to humans, it's fed to livestock, right? And so think about that, right? So I've actually thought about this thing called C. diff, right? When you hear community-acquired C. diff, and I was actually embarking on a study before I left my academic role on looking at the role of meat eaters and the risk of community-acquired C. diff. Because I believe it's these toxic low levels of exposure that we don't see or feel that ultimately accumulate in our bodies, right, over time, right, that cause disasters in our microbiome. And in terms of cancer research, and MD Anderson has an amazing integrative oncology practice down there. Lorenzo is a dear friend of mine. I've known him for 25 years. We studied a lot together in our early formative training. And there's another company that I do have one conflict of interest. I work for Performance Kitchen, which is a medically tailored meal company. But there's a company, and I wanted to mention this because I think it's pretty fascinating, is how money's going to this too. There's a company out in England called FAETH, it's called Faith Health, that focus on not feeding the tumor. So diets particularly, and again, a lot of cancer research focuses on the drugs, and I've recently saw a patient with cancer, and the oncologist, okay, said to them, doesn't matter what you eat because we're going to give you chemo anyway. And I would argue that's not exactly right.
So one last question from LinkedIn, and I know there are some more questions in the room. What we're going to do is we'll take the question on LinkedIn because they don't have the opportunity to, interact here in person, and that is the role and the consumption of, an omega-6 polyunsaturated fat like linoleic acid in modern American diets, and how has that contributed to inflammation-mediated diseases of modern times?
So going back to fat, all right? So there's good fats and bad fats, right? And so that's what we lump them in two different categories, right? One is called saturated fats. Oh, speaking to that woman over there. So saturated fats
And unsaturated.
and unsaturated fats, right? And unsaturated fats come into two categories, MUFAs and PUFAs, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. The difference is how many carbons are attached to the actual molecule. Right? And so when you think about MUFAs and PUFAs, right, you're already making a better choice. This is olive oil, avocado oil, right? But then there are other oils, like linoleic acid, that have higher rates of omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. So when you think about that, they are, and it gets a little complicated, right? Because it's under a pathway that modulates what they call arachidonic acid, which is a very pro-inflammatory compound. And that's what it activates. So therefore, when you eat more of these kind of linoleic-rich foods, but the number one cause of omega-6 fatty acid imbalance in our diet is the unhealthy nature of our food system, particularly our animal and meat proteins. Very high amounts of omega-6 fatty acids. And so what we want to try to do is balance that omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, so therefore you have more omega-3 fatty acids in your diet and less omega-6 fatty acids. And most of the diseases, and blood, and docs too, I would say this, is throw in a uric acid. Right? Throw in your cascade of tests, just throw a uric acid, because oftentimes a lot of particularly people who eat a lot of animal proteins have high rates of inflammation. Gout. Right? And so we often forget that one as a cause of mucho dolor, a lot of pain. Right? And a lot of pain migrates in the finger, in the toe, in the knee, and I have seen just by simply checking uric acid levels on patients who eat a more carnivorous diet have high rates of gout.
So we have many more questions on LinkedIn on food allergies. So I would say to everybody, wait until next week. We're going to talk about food allergies, GMOs, why there is a huge rise in food allergies, etc. But for now, we're going to call it a wrap. But feel free to just mingle, have another glass of wine, and you're around for another few minutes too. But thank you so much.
Of course.
This has just been an extraordinary conversation, and really, really appreciate all the insights and all the advice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your attention.
Yes.